I'm worried.
Oh, well, this could be entertaining.
Yeah, time for a roasting. Jesus, boy.
Yeah, righto.
Hello and welcome to the roast episode of the Magical. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. My name's Jez. I'm your host today, and the Magical Learning Podcast is the podcast of Magical Learning, a training and facilitation company that's been running for over 25 years and worked with people like Robin Sharma and John Ratone. We have an amazing guest on today, and they're a friend of the podcast. That's what we were just talking about before we got on. But before we get to them, we've got a team regular, John. How are you going this week? How's things?
I'm good, guys. No, very good. I'm employed again. Someone was silly enough to re-employ me. It's fantastic. I got a job. Woo! And not just with my wife either, doing her stuff. So this is good.
Nice. Is it going to lead to any additions to the famous recording pool room where you're beaming out of right now?
Well, no, it might mean I have to go into an office here in Canberra, a government office. And it's like, I don't want to be doing that, but
No, skip
I may
that,
not have
John.
many
Jeez,
saying
mate.
it either.
Even Ricky Martin's better than that.
Yes, absolutely. And that's
Mhm.
Saturday night. So what's today's Friday. So Saturday night, yeah, Ricky Martin. We can revisit that next week.
That sounds good. That's good. We'll get the update on that. So, John, doing a bit of a magical learning of Ricky Martin, and then we'll see next week how that show was. Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Well, that's it, John. Great to have you on today. Tim Jack Adams, friend of the podcast. You can check him out on previous episodes and also on the Adapt with Danet FM podcast. But Tim, welcome back to the ML podcast. How's your week been?
Mate, I'm kicking ass this week, Jez. I'm actually really loving it, dude. We've taken the foot off the accelerator a little bit in our family, and we've decided just to, flow free. And there's been lots of swims and frolics and ponderings, and it's been good, mate. I got to snorkel with the turtles yesterday. Took my little girl out on a paddleboard this morning. So life's pretty good, mate. I'm just working on the tan at the moment, to be honest, mate. That's what's happening with me. The tan and the
tan and the
curls,
guns.
mate. Yeah, so it's just feeling good, brother.
That's it. Well, I mean, like we were just mentioning this again before the chat, but I got a fresh haircut yesterday. So if you're not watching on YouTube, head over for a fresh trim. I was saying Tim's got to get on this. He's got to get the poorly cut mullet as well.
It's the
It's
comb forward, Jez. It's the most people do the comb over. You've done the comb forward. It's like Adam's, look like Adam's family character.
It's aerodynamic, Tim. Like there's no wasted hair on the side here at all.
Well, the great thing is it's original and no one's going to copy you, mate. So thank God for that.
I really saw you coming.
That's it. Look, I am here in Melbourne. I think I'd be a good shoe-in for the Melbourne Fringe Festival next year, So,
Right. I was like, look, don't tell me you paid for that. And hopefully someone just put a bowl over your head and just cut around it. Because if you paid for it, I'm worried.
Tim, you don't understand what Melbourne is. Melbourne is you pay $100 and you get the worst haircut you've ever seen. That's the rules here in Melbourne.
It's true, mate. I was in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, and I was thinking, you guys look weird. You bloody, you talk to me like I'm an animal. I'm like, Jesus Christ. I was like, what's going on down here? it's hardcore.
Yeah, you gotta, Tim. If you wanna interact properly with Melbourneites, you really got to get the whippersnipper to the hair, and then they'll be like, okay, I understand what's going on here.
And grunting too. You don't say hello. You just grunt. You just look at them and like,
That's it. Aerodynamic, efficient. That's it. Well, Tim, you were just mentioning this before we get into today's conversation. Speaking of the not being in Melbourne, you do want to tell us a little bit about where you are, and also you've already been talking about nature, but tell us a little bit about your sort of connection to nature for people that maybe this is the first time jumping on with you here, because I think that's an amazing part of your sort of story and stuff.
All right. So I live on the Tweed coast, which is in Northern Rivers, a little town called Kingscliff. Best way to describe it's kind of halfway between the Gold Coast and Byron Bay, a little coastal village. And we moved here from the Goldie about 17 years ago to start a company called Water Sports Guru. So Water Sports Guru is literally, born from my love of having adventures, getting people out and about on the water, snorkeling with the turtles, kayaking, paddleboarding, surfing, mate. It doesn't matter as long as it's on the water. I'm in my happy place. And so that that's been going for 17 years. The coolest thing now is actually I get to bring my kids to work, which is amazing. And I was actually down there before because I sort of went down with my kids, and a couple of customers are like, Timmy, isn't it great you can bring your kids to work day? And I was thinking, yeah, I could be in a bloody accountant, mate. My kids would be like sitting there watching me type away on a keyboard all day. I'd be like, yeah, no, screw that, mate. So I feel like I've nailed the dad job. And then, I think I'm really cool. But then when my wife says like what her job is, she's a firefighter. And then and then I'm not the cool guy anymore. So it's like, oh, your wife's a firefighter. Let's just talk about that. And my hot 6-foot unicorn wife, mate. So anyway, that's been amazing. And then I was doing that. I started that in 2009. 2012 is kind of where all this sort of happened. I started asking the question, why is it when we actively engage in nature, do we seem to be healthier and happier? And so it kind of had this hybrid cross between water sports and wellness, which wellness is just looking after yourself. And basically pieced all that together, started looking at all the science behind nature and what actually happens when you go outdoors. Now, why this is important is because we're actually spending less time outdoors than maximum security prisoners, over 90% of our time, which is just ridiculous. And basically, mate, we're vitamin D deficient. We're becoming spectators, like for crying out loud, Australians. Like, what are we doing here? We're boring as batshit these days. So, my job is just to try and inspire people to get back outdoors and play again. And, somehow I landed up in this podcast with the Three Stooges. How good is this? I'm looking at us boys and just going, hey, we could be a comedy act. This is awesome.
That's it. It's now. This is a comedy podcast. That's why we love having you on, Tim. Is we like to take a slightly different direction. Well, Tim, we're so happy to have you on, and I think it's so right when you put it in that sort of framing. You sort of start to sort of shudder at the amount of time we're spending outside. And actually, since our last podcast, I have actually been spending more time outside. It's become something that I've been working on a bit more. So I have been taking it on board. But today we're going to be mostly talking about an interesting idea that you brought to us, which is the origination of the word culture coming from the idea of cultus, which means to care. And what if we dive deep into sort of how that can be looking for employees and how much employees should be looking at their own well-being? I thought this was a really good conversation. So I think let's maybe did you want to talk about that before we get into the questions at all?
Yeah, so I think, and look, that we're going to take a real right turn now to go from being the Three Stooges to something that's probably a little bit more serious. But we can bring some fun into it because at the end of the day, one of the best ways to actually create good culture is through fun, right, boys? So, that's having the banter, the jokes. And unfortunately, we've actually forgotten about that. We've been measuring Australia's well-being for 7 years now. Fun has always been the lowest. And, God knows how many hundreds of teams I've worked with now in so many different industries. But the one thing that I've noticed is the teams that have really good batteries, right, that are really strong and are glued into great culture seem to be the ones that can have a bit of a laugh throughout the day and have a bit of a banter and, talk shit to each other. And I think what that does is it builds a lot of trust, right? And trust builds care, and care is culture. So I think what I've been seeing over the last 10 years working with so many different organizations, and all over the world now is that, people have kind of misunderstood what culture actually means. They kind of think that culture is, having a great pool room like John's got there, the table tennis table, having a canteen, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, mate, if all of that's just, for shits and giggles and you don't actually take responsibility for caring for your staff, which really just means I see you, I hear you, and I'm happy to actually take care for you, then, mate, all of that other stuff can seem very frivolous. And it's actually, it was interesting because I was talking to one of my clients the other day who said, look, Timmy, we're about to do a huge sprint. I'm scared shitless that I've got to go tell my staff, we've just worked our asses off on this last sprint. Now I'm going to go hit them again about saying, look, that last sprint we did, look, it didn't equate to anything. We lost the job. And now I've got to come back. And I said, well, mate, how have you been looking after your staff throughout the year? Like, have you been caring for them? Have you been really putting in the effort? He said, mate, honestly, I do. I'm always looking after my staff. I said, well, then tell them, mate. Tell them they're going to have to sort of do some work for you and put some hard yards in because you've earned the trust, right? And I think Brene Brown has this great metaphor about marbles in the jar. And I really love this. And it's about every time, whether it's at work or with a relationship, when you're creating those little trust marbles, you're putting them in the jar and you just keep putting all those marbles in. And it's something, if someone sort of breaks that trust, you take a marble out. And sometimes you can do something, so bad that all the marbles get tipped out onto the floor and you've got to start again. But, whether you're a boss or a husband, a wife, it's all about putting those marbles into the jar. And when you've got that jar relatively full, that's when you know that you've actually done a good job of caring for your staff or your family or your friends. And that's when you can start actually really pulling in those favors.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Tim, I think that that's going to set up this conversation really nicely, and I think we've got a lot of really good questions to get into. So I might start with John's here. John, since you're here, do you want to ask your question and sort of any thoughts you've been having?
I want to go different path at this stage, but you talked about the humour and the stuff that goes on. How important is and I'll call it black humour or guillotine humour sort of stuff, being able to laugh at the hard times. How important is that to build that care and that bonding for the team? Because it's not
And look,
all
laughing
roses.
is, yeah, it's not all roses. And the thing is, I think, John, as we know, mate, laughter is one of the best medicines,
Mm,
right? And I think we've taken ourselves so seriously, not just here in Australia, but I think a lot of the world is taking ourselves so seriously that we've forgot that when we actually laugh, we actually create these endorphins, these dopamines. And when you're doing it with someone else, it's the oxytocin, it's the hug hormone. So there's all these amazing things that actually happen when you have a good sort of satirical laugh or banter. It doesn't have to be at the expense of somebody else, but
no, no,
this
no,
is where that
no.
comes in. And I just think that, at the moment in this current climate, man, a lot of us are struggling, whether that's economically or just socially, loneliness, fastest growing epidemic. And what I find is that the more that we struggle, the more our batteries start to get depleted, the less laughs we actually have. And I always find this when I'm doing a workshop or a keynote. I ask this question. I always tell people, I was like, what do you do for fun? Mate,
Yeah,
half the audience will sit there and go, "Oh, fun. Yeah, right. Fun. Shit. What do I do for fun?" Right?
yeah,
And it's quite scary because they kind of forgotten what fun is. And look, fun's different for all of us. Fun for me is going out for a free dive or a paddle, or, sometimes for someone else, John, I think for you it's knitting and having a cup of tea, mate. Like,
yeah,
you
pretty
know, where
much. That's pretty much armour.
yeah, and so I think that back in the day, Aussies were always seen as those larrikins, right? For the rest
Yeah,
of the world, they looked at us, like Jez's haircut, and they're going, "Oh, those bloody larrikins," over there in Australia. And I feel like we've kind of lost that, that sense of humor that we once had. And I'd love to somehow bring it back, mate. And look, it's not easy because it comes down to us, emotionally, and mentally being able to be in a good, safe space to actually feel like we can laugh.
yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things I've always tried to do is, and I heard a saying many years ago that things may be grave, but they don't need to be serious. And it's like,
Mm,
and even, I've had loss in my life, loss of a brother and stuff, but we still take the piss out of him, even though he's not here. And the fact that he's dead and,
yeah.
he can't defend himself. And that's the sort of stuff that, I like that dark humor. I like, um,
Yeah.
you know, you've got to find humor in things. I think otherwise you do go mad. Um,
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism, right, John?
oh,
And I
100%.
think one of my favorite quotes, which leans into yours, is, there's not one scrap of evidence to say that life should be taken seriously. And I love that quote because, mate, we've spent years researching well-being, and, seriousness comes in at every corner. And I'm like, well, I
Yeah,
haven't found any evidence to say that we should be taking life seriously. Like, you show me where it is, and then, I might think about it again. But yeah,
yeah.
I don't understand why we can't have a laugh, mate. And
Oh,
yeah, it's so
100%.
good, mate, that you're taking the piss out of your dead brother, you bastard. Jesus Christ, mate.
He can't defend himself and should have worn a seatbelt and all this other crap. Well, he's a loser.
Uh,
But I mean,
good on you,
I
John.
haven't listening to a podcast on Keith Miller, the Australian cricketer, and he was also a fighter pilot in World War II. And someone asked
Mm,
him, I think it was Parkinson, or someone asked him in an interview, how do you deal with the stress of going out and opening the batting against, and they rattled off different fast bowlers and blah blah blah. And he thought for a minute and sort of goes, well, stress is a Messerschmitt up your ass at Mark II. It's not opening the batting for Australia. And it's like perspective. And you go, yeah, actually, perspective is a really good way to put
yeah.
things. That, you know, coping and care can still be done in those
Mm.
humorous times, in those dark times with humor as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think too, mate, we work with first responders and, my wife's a first responder. She's a
Yeah,
fire, mate. They can go to some pretty fatal,
shit, yeah,
sort of incidents. And for them, mate, it's about going back to the station and really just having a good laugh it out, right? Because
yeah.
at the end of the day, mate, if you sit there and you stir on it and you think about it and you boil up on it, mate, that's when you're going to end up with PTSD and all the other things
Oh,
that
for
come with
sure.
it. And so for those guys, mate, it is. It's about just having a good laugh about it. The black humor. It's about
Yeah,
getting in and playing some pickleball, mate, just to let go of any of that excess energy and to leave it at work. Because the worst
yeah,
thing we can do, as husbands, fathers, and friends, is to take that home with us and to
yeah,
constantly stir on it, to wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning thinking about it. Because then that energy is feeding into our family and our friends and
yeah,
everyone else around us. And
yeah.
mate, that's certainly not beneficial to anybody.
Yeah, and I think as a partner, someone like yourself with that culture of care, her being a first responder, going home to an environment that you can be yourself and you can, cry at times or unwind in different ways. But yeah, that culture of care becomes really important in the home.
And my trust is always just keep coming up, right? Like I just keep, talking about care, but really it's coming to trust. Trust that you
Yes.
can open up and actually
Yeah.
talk about how you're feeling. Trust that someone's going to have your back. Like at
Yeah.
the end of the day, care is really about trust, isn't it? And that trust that you have with an
Yeah.
individual, a team, an organization. And yeah, I don't know, it just keeps coming up
Yeah.
all the time when I'm thinking about care.
Great combo there, guys. I
Yeah.
mean, really interesting. And speaking of, what
There
a
she is.
time. Danette joining us
There
live,
she
special
is.
guest. How are you going, Danette?
Yeah, good. Apologies for the delay. Uber's been playing up today, so waited for a minute, car that was a minute away for 15 minutes, and then got another
Uh,
car. So apologies.
Well, you missed all the fun stuff, mate. We talked for 15 minutes to net, and then you've come into when it got all serious. So,
Yeah. We've got to behave now.
Well,
Mum's here.
that's the other
I
side.
know. Oh, boys, all right, pull it in the line.
No,
Here she
yeah.
is.
Don't fall love
No,
what we've done before, Jez. Let's start again. Do the intro again,
Well,
Jez.
Yeah, welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. No, Danette, it's great to have you. So Danette, you're in a different location. Before we get into your question and before we dive in, whereabouts are you at the moment?
So I'm in Melbourne. I just saw Jez probably less than an hour ago, and was getting back into the city. So staying in the city, heading back to the farm tomorrow. So super excited, but had a great week, bit of travel. Always awesome to see everyone.
You're right,
well,
mate.
well, Danette, I might throw to you now. Since you've joined us, do you want to ask your question and get this conversation back on some sort of track here?
All right. So as always, Tim, you know me, I love a good question, and this time I always have at least two. So my first question is, how do you define care?
So we were just actually talking about this. We're calling ourselves the Three Stooges before you got on there, Danette. But
We can be
I
the
was actually
four.
saying, yeah, I was actually saying with the boys that trust keeps coming up. When we're
Nice.
talking about care, it always
Yes.
seems to come back for me about having trust in individuals, in a team, in an organization, because with that trust, you feel that vulnerable, you can be vulnerable, you can be open, you can be transparent. And that really comes down to, yeah, we can have culture that, we're eating great food and we've got a bloody yoga lady that rocks up every Friday to do our downward dogs. But at the end of the day, if you can't sort of walk out of that yoga studio and actually into an environment where you can say to your colleague next door, hey, you know what, I'm having a shit time at the moment and I really need some help to, can you back me up? Then, we're really not caring, are we? We're not taking responsibility to really value. And I think, the other three words that I brought up before on the podcast is those three things of feeling valued, having a
Yeah.
sense of meaning and belonging. And I think that, if I look at my household, that's the three things I'm always trying to create, not just for my family, but also for my workers as well, is that, do I make you feel valued?
Yeah.
Do you feel like we have a sense of meaning and do you feel like we belong, and, you were a part of this together? And, sometimes it's about just being really honest and going, okay, what can I do better? And it was really funny because I asked my 4-year-old boy this yesterday. We're sitting down on the couch. The girls were outside, and I said, hey, bud, how am I going as a dad? Like, how am I really going, mate? Like, what could I do to be a better dad? Like, the kid's almost 5, so I'm like, he's ready for this question. And and you know what he said? He said, Dad, I wish you'd do more cuddle traps. I want you to do more cuddle traps with me. And
Oh, I love
for
that.
the audience
It's like gorgeous.
for the audience that has no idea what a cuddle trap is, it's like it's kind of a mix between wrestling and cuddling that I've got to like cuddle him so tight and he has to get out of it. And I was thinking, and I was like, right, do better, Dad. More cuddle traps, mate. And I wonder how many leaders out there go to their staff and go, how can I do better? Like what can I do to do better? And you're probably going to get some ridiculous answers like put in a vending machine with M&Ms in it. But yeah, there might be some good ones in there that's full transparency. So yeah, there we go. Long-winded answer on that one, Danette.
No, and I love that because, it's often really simple things that show that we care. I love, your breakup of the different elements of it as well. And that thing about trust so resonates. So great answer. So then my next question is, what happens when a workplace actually stops caring about their people? And we're definitely seeing this at the moment where organizations are going to AI and stuff and going, our people are replaceable. Yeah.
Mm.
Curious about
So
your
we're all human, right? And the first thing that came to mind is what happens when a good friend of yours starts to distance themselves. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because at the moment we've had, and look, it's a personal one, but it's quite interesting. So we had a really good friend group. We had the kids the same age, and now Carly and I have decided to have another kid. And and for us, like, and I'm just, this is me not even talking to him about it. And this is the next thing I'm going to do is ring him up. But it's kind of that slow, what's the word I'm looking for, team? It's like that slowly disconnect. It's not that, hey guys, like, look, I don't think we can be friends anymore. I was really gelling and, I'm just not matching your energy. And so we're not going to be friends. It's that other thing about, you were friends and now all of a sudden you've just got this quiet disconnection and you start kind of going, is it me? Is it them? Like, what's going on here? And I think that it's the same when you've got a boss or anyone like that, when you thought they cared, and then all of a sudden there's that kind of like that silent disconnection that creeps in, and all of a sudden you go, oh, I don't really feel that valued anymore. Right. I don't think I don't think we've got any common interests anymore. And I think it's that degradation of connection that starts to creep in. And I think for me, if I feel that happening, there's two things we can do, right? One is we can, sort of, be bold and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. Are you feeling the same way? Like, what's going on with this relationship of ours? Or you can kind of go, oh yeah, fuck them. Like that's them. It's their problem. You're like, whatever. Who gives a shit? I didn't care about that person anyway, even though I saw him every day for lunch. Now I don't even miss him. And so I think we've kind of got to be honest with ourselves. And, and if we're doing that with our staff, if we're kind of doing that slow disconnection, like, oh, maybe they won't even realize that I've stopped caring. I think that's all. It's more venomous than the actual, hey, God, hey, this just isn't working anymore. I think we don't have the same value alignment. I think you could, it's not me, it's you kind of thing. It's not you, it's me kind of thing. So yeah, it's a terrible metaphor, I know, but hopefully that got the point across somehow for the 1% out there that could understand the garble that I just said.
No, it was a good answer because I think back to when I was working and I had a boss who, when she put you in an acting position, you were her best buddy. And then the moment you weren't in that position, the next person who acted in that position was the best buddy. And it was like, it just felt really icky and it didn't motivate me to want to bring my best version of myself to the workplace because of that particular approach. And, I suppose for employers that are wanting to stand out, doing the opposite and, recruit, because a lot of people still say we can't get good people.
Mm-hmm.
So I reckon you're
Mm.
on a great topic around this one too.
Yeah, you summed that up so much better than I did, Danette. Well done. 10 words instead of 1,000. Good job. Thank God you're here.
No, I love that, Danette, and thanks for summing that up nicely because I think I'm going to make it messy again here, Tim, because what you're talking about then, interestingly, with that sort of I don't know if this is the right word. It's not a friend breakup, but it's like this friend distancing that sort of has the same effect as a breakup. Interestingly, I have another podcast that I produce that's about Real Housewives, okay? Weirdly, of all shows. And yesterday, the season just ended, and so we're watching the reunion. And in the reunion episodes, what they do is they talk about all the problems that happen throughout the season, and they try and resolve them, sort of all seated around a couch once it's all like left. And what were you talking about there with the sort of distancing of the friends that is just really zoomed in on in Real Housewives, because it's all about the relationship. So when someone has like one of these sort of things, or when there's subtle things that are broken up with, even though I know Real Housewives is not an amazing cultural phenomenon, it's not a documentary or anything like that, it does focus a lot on these tiny moments that end up creating the series of that end up creating the links in the chain that end up separating friends out. And you can almost watch it. If you were to analyze the scenes correctly, you could actually watch that friendship dissipate based on the different small moments, just because of how it's created. So that was something that was interesting to me when you were talking.
Yeah, and it's almost like taking those marbles back out of the jar that we were talking about before, right? That full jar, and all of a sudden they're empty, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess that relationship's over.
Yeah. And the other thing that I've just been thinking as you've been talking as well, when we're talking about, trust and that concept of, some places that have all the pool tables or the table tennis tables, but then the culture's sort of weird. I did a brief work at a place like this, right? It was like a TV studio, and their whole thing was meant to be being fun. And then they had these table tennis tables and stuff, and like arcade games and a little canteen and all this stuff. But because the business was not doing very well, it was almost like it was a threat to use them, like, because then it was showing you weren't really focused on the work in a way. Like what it had represented, it now represented almost the opposite. It was like this relic of a time when this business was sort of like this, but now it acts as like this sort of, I don't even know how to describe it, like this thing that I was afraid to even be near, because it would look like you weren't working, if you know what I mean.
And I was just thinking about layers, and I was thinking about, I've got this thing called layers of happiness, and it's one of those things that, you can, each morning I wake up and we've got a coffee machine at home, and, you get your beans and you ground the beans, and you create this amazing experience, and you sniff it, and then, the next day you've forgotten to buy the bloody beans, right? And so you go up there and you go pick your Nescafe 43 out, your instant coffee, and you're kind of sitting there and you're like, oh, yep, that's what I've got today, right? And it's these extra layers of happiness. It's like when I go for a swim each day, it's that extra layer of happiness. And if I think about culture, it's like, how many layers of trust is there? Like, it's depth, right? And so, for that place that you're talking about, they've tried to add layers in terms of, it's almost adding makeup to a face, right? It doesn't mean that there's depth or quality in that person. And so I think when it comes to culture, it's like, are we trying to add makeup, and these are the fancy things that we're putting in place? Or do we actually have depth? Do we have marbles? Do we have those layers of trust there? And therefore, you don't need the fancy shit. You just need to rock up and be yourself. And, at the end of the day, if you all get it on, you all like each other, it's all authentic, then really you love showing up to work. You don't need a ping pong table, although that is fun to kick someone's ass too. Like, let's be honest, but that can be fun.
Absolutely. Look, I love that, Tim, and that's great. I think I'm going to have to jump back into some of these questions, but I've been loving how we've been sort of flying around here a little bit. Let's go to Graham's question here. And this is Graham's written, in your experience, does a person's non-work life, relationships, habits, physical environment, have a greater effect on their mental health than what happens at work? Are workplace wellness efforts more often just a band-aid solution?
Oh, Graham, how's the question, mate? Jesus, good question, Graham. I would say it's different circumstances in different times, because at the end of the day, you could have a really toxic relationship at home, and that's going to affect your work life because you just can't get out of it. And look, growing up, I remember my mum dated a guy who was very toxic, and it took 2 years of her life, away from her and her productivity, and, but then it can also happen on the flip side, whereas you can have a really toxic relationship at work, which is also then impacting, your relationships at home. And so I think it's both either or none at the same time.
To some degree, it's like you just have a life, and then there's the work life and the personal life. I think we've sort of touched on this sometimes in other podcasts, but yeah, it's like it's so hard to distill each of those from each other. But I think a lot of what you talk about with nature, I think can help as an inspiration as to how you can approach different things like this in different ways. So that's always why I'm loving jumping on these calls.
And
Yeah,
Jez,
go ahead, Danette.
can I just ask Tim, because I was looking at your brochure and I like the fact that, you talk about the value of EAP at work, but you also have your EEP. So I'd love if you wouldn't mind
Mm.
sharing that with our listeners and viewers as well. You may have already done it earlier in the podcast, but no? Okay, perfect.
No, we weren't talking about anything serious before you rocked up, Danette. Just three clowns having fun. So that's yeah, so we
That's
have
the way it
this
should
thing.
be.
So yeah, and so look, an EAP, for those that most of people, our listeners, are going to know, that's the Employee Assistance Program. And look, we've been having lots of conversations about this EAP, especially for the leaders that I coach, and we've all kind of gotten to that place where we've realised we've kind of cocked it up. Right, because with an EAP, it's created this victim mentality of, hey, when you get sick, we will help you, right? And that's probably, when you're thinking about care, it's probably not the great way to go about it. What we want to say is that, hey, we're going to care for you so you don't get sick, right? We're going to do the things that we need to do so you don't need to actually access a psychologist or a psychiatrist or God knows whatever else. And I was just thinking about, marriage then, because when my wife and I got married, we were kind of asking each other, like, what does it mean now, babe? Like, what am I doing for you? What are you doing for me? And what we realize is that, number one, we're trying to look after our own well-being first, right? Because if I'm sick, I can't help my family, and vice versa. The next thing that we're trying to do is that once we're well, then I'm trying to look after her well-being, right? And vice versa. And so a marriage is about looking after not only your own well-being, but that other person's well-being. And so I think it's almost like, an organization. It's like, for us leaders, we need to be well in ourselves so we can look after our own well-being. Therefore, we're in a better position to look after and help with the well-being of others. Now, that doesn't mean that we should be taking full control of our staff's well-being. I believe that we can give them the tools to empower themselves, but I also think that there is that sort of juxtaposition where, if you're trying to get the best out of your staff, because look, let's be honest, we're paying them, we're wanting them to do their best. Like, we're also supporting that person, their family. So, there's a lot of, look, it's kind of hard, right? Because sometimes you go, fucking wish they'd just be grateful for having a job with me, right? Like, that's what I know a lot of them would say. And I'm sick and tired of when they blow their nose, I got to run over and bloody wipe it for them. But the other side is too, we're also grateful that we have staff so we can grow and so we can get our message out there. And so it's almost like this, it's like a marriage. It's like, I'm going to do my very best to look after you. I hopefully that you're going to do your very best to look after me. And that's where that trust and building up that marble jar comes from. And so an employee empowerment program is just like that, right? It's just about being able to, prevent them getting sick because I actually care for you. And, I also want you to care for me. And hopefully from that, we create that value, meaning, belonging, and that self-worth for an organization and a team to want to just have each other's back all the time.
Great answer, and thank you for sharing that.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that, Tim. And I wanted to get into my question now. And, I believe rest is something that we've kind of forgotten how to do a little bit. When I think of how we sort of live now, I think there's a lot of us compressing a lot of information. Like, there's a lot, we're taking in so much information all the time. Visually, with people on social media more and more, you're just taking in an obscene amount of information. Even without all that, it's just a lot. And I think that when I think about that, I think about how much that's just compressing information. And then when I think about rest, I think about that's the time that we would usually decompress. And I think in the past, we used to have a lot more decompression time just because we didn't have phones. Like, I've used this on the podcast before, but like, if you were on a bus in 1990 and you didn't have a book, you were just decompressing because you didn't have another option. You were just sitting there looking out the window. Now people would be on their phone and doing something else.
Yeah.
So I know this isn't exactly the topic that we're talking about today, but I really love your approach to all this type of thinking and how you sort of approach this. So I guess for me, how do you approach rest and recovery for yourself, and then I guess sometimes for your team as well?
Yeah, and I think the best metaphor that I've kind of come to sort of explain this to, and really interesting because I took my kids down to the creek with water sports guru this morning because straight after I had a mindfulness in the mangroves, and we created mindfulness in the mangroves back in 2017 after we did all the research around movement, environment, earthing, time, connection, breath, and we created that. And there were two stressed out corporates from Melbourne, and they're like, Timmy, we just need to decompress, right? Exactly what you said, Jez. And I think about the metaphor that, if you get into a car, and I used to be a bogan back in the day, all I wanted to do was be a mechanic, and do donuts around the car parks at the Pines Tire and Auto. And I think about I was always, fucking revving the car, right? And just redlining it. And I think about our brains like that. Like, we're constantly on, right? We're always stuck in our brains. We're problem solving. And if we don't take that foot off the accelerator, right, just like a car, the car's going to blow up. Eventually that car is going to blow up. And, what you said about being on the bus in the 1990s, Jez, I think that people think that when they look at their screen, they're decompressing. And I think this is the problem because at work, the brain's on, it's going hard, right? The foot's to the floor. And then they stop work, but then they go straight onto their screens. And the screen is creating this dopamine hit still. Their foot is still on the accelerator. They haven't taken the foot off. They're just on a different racetrack. And so what I think we have to get people to understand is that decompression is literally, it is taking the foot off. And one of the greatest ways that we can do this is in nature, because when we're around man-made objects, right, our brain's constantly finding patterns. And when we finally get into nature, and this is why, for our listeners, I want them to think about every time they go to the beach or every time they're in a forest or every time they're watching, they're sitting by a campfire, that they actually feel relaxed, right? And, I was just come back from camping the other week and, 3 nights just sitting in front of a campfire, for me, was just one of the most magical things because all of a sudden my brain stopped finding patterns, right? Your brain actually stops looking for those patterns and it switches off. And so when we talk about, resetting, it's about, well, where's an environment in your life that you go to that that your brain just completely switches off? And it's not indoors, it's not in front of a screen. Chances are that person's probably saying, you know what, when I go to Melbourne's Botanical Park and I sit there and watch the ducks and, the water and the palm trees, I actually think that that's when I feel like I can finally decompress and reset. So in my mind, it's like, for me and my staff, we're bloody lucky, mate, because we're always just taking people out and resetting and decompressing. But it's really interesting because I went and ran a leadership workshop last week and, they flew everyone in and it was a full day of think out of the box and, we're going to think differently and we're going to strategize for 2026. And what do they do? They put us in a box, mate, with no windows in 4 walls. And I'm just thinking, you guys are aren't you? Like, how much money did you spend to bring us all here to do this? And you've literally put us in a box. Like the thing's called think outside the box. So obviously, mate, I've them off with the room and went out to the bloody garden close by and we spent, our time under a tree and said, right, here's a horizon, think bigger, think differently. Let's actually get our creative juices going. Sorry for the swearing, ladies and gentlemen. But it blows my mind that people say think differently, but we'll just stay in the same environment that we've been in for the last 360 days of the year. Jesus Christ, people, come on.
Yeah, and just off that, Tim, something that I had to realize for myself, and this might be more obvious to you than it was to me, was that before, like, I guess the 1950s, anything that's on a screen couldn't have been someone's hobby just because there weren't any screens around, So, like, there's a lot of hobbies that existed before that time that are not, you don't have to be attached to a power source to be using. And so that's sort of helped me sort of look at what kind of hobbies could I do. But yeah, no, loved this. I'm like on the edge of should I ask another question or should we wrap up?
Do whatever you want, Jez.
One more. All right, that's it. That's it.
You can say whatever you want.
Aerodynamic. That means we should go. We'll dive into one more question quickly. Then let's jump into Mark's question here. Mark has asked, how can care be built into the daily rhythm of work, not just in HR programs or wellness incentives?
And I think like a lot of this comes to the employees themselves doing it for themselves. And I think a perfect example is yesterday I had a workshop with a call center, highly stressed out people, just copying shit all the time. They work for a council. And I was like, right, how long are your lunch breaks? And they're like, we get 45 minutes, Tim. I'm like, how many people actually use those lunch breaks to look after for their own well-being? They're like, yeah, no, we kind of multitask and work through. And now, let's be honest, their office was sitting right outside of a park with a beautiful river in front of them. Like, I mean, 10 meters away from their front door. And I'm like, ladies, wouldn't this be amazing if you could just go outside, have a great conversation, leave your technology behind, bring a plate of food each, and actually just unwind, get some vitamin D, have some fun, kick your shoes off, you know what I mean? And just have a good old chin wag. And they're like, yeah, that would be really fun. Why don't we do that, girls? And I'm just thinking, that requires no HR. It doesn't require any EAPs. It's just a bunch of people wanting to connect, have some fun with each other, and get all the benefits of it. And I think for that question, it's like, use your own initiative and do something yourself. It's your lunch break. Go make advantage of it.
Yeah, no, great answer. Perfect answer there, Tim. And I think that that's such a good one because I think it's so easy with work. It's like I remember when I was working in an office more, it was so easy to make that lunch break bleed into work, like office work, because you're already in the office anyway. And, something needs to get done before the end of the day. You're calculating the hours in your head and thinking this. So, this is not the case at Magical Learning, people, but this was, at previous jobs.
Yeah. And the to-do list never ends. I think we have to remind ourselves of that. It's not like when we finish that to-do list, that's the end of it for life. It's like that to-do list just keeps on going. And so, it's about building that life that supports you and not the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tim, so this conversation has been fantastic. We've gone in all different types of directions. And I might grab some final thoughts from everybody. We didn't even get to all the questions in the chat, so we'll have to have you back for end of the podcast, Tim. I know it's going to happen anyway, so we'll have you back at some point and we'll get into some more of this. But let's head over to John. John, did you have any final thoughts today on today's conversation?
Yeah, look, I loved it, and I love the irreverence of it all. So that to me, and sorry, Danette, it was worse before you turned up, but yeah, the irreverence was.
That's okay.
That's my style of humour. I think the question of that you asked your 4-year-old son, what can I do better, or how am I going as a dad, and constantly asking that question in all aspects of your life, but taking that responsibility to do that and then to do something with it. So not just what can I do better? Yeah, that was great. What's next? It's what can I do better? And then what do I need to do with that information to actually do better? And trying to get that depth that you talked about in the in the organisation or in the home or wherever it may be. But yeah, and it's simple things. It doesn't have to be complex. Like I can hear the magpie chick outside that I've started feeding with the parents over the last week. So
gorgeous, John.
as soon as I go out, as soon as this ends, I'm out there. I'll throw it some food and almost got the parents actually eating out of my hand. So it's that to
Marbles
me
in the
is
jar, John.
yeah, that's important. So yeah,
That's
simple
gorgeous,
things.
mate. Yeah. And I think and it was funny, John, because, I was driving home from the gym this morning and the sun was coming up and there was a full
Yeah.
moon in the sky. And I was thinking, I want to find extraordinary in the ordinary,
Yeah,
right? How do we find extraordinary in the ordinary? And you did that, right? Like you're doing that with that baby magpie and their family. That's awe-inspiring and that's extraordinary in the ordinary.
yeah. But I mean, how many people stop to look at the sunrise or the moon in the sky, like
Mm,
taking the color of the sky or the green of the grass or whatever it may be? Those simple moments, they're all around
mm.
us.
Beautiful, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And John, thanks for the combo today. It's been a fun one. Danette, any final thoughts on today's conversation?
Yeah. Oh, what a great. I wish I'd been there at the beginning. I love the cuddle trap. That's such a great thing. And a couple of other things. When you were talking about the layers of happiness, the layers of trust. So is it just makeup or are we going for that depth? And I think, yeah, as leaders in organization, that's a really good thing to consider. Are we developing those layers? And I have to say, you've already come up with the next podcast chat that we can have with you, which is Extraordinary in the Ordinary.
Ah, lovely. I've got to start growing the mullet for that one.
That's it.
Start
Starts
working
now,
on it.
Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
No, and great idea, Danette, and thanks for doing the podcast producing for me by selecting the topic. That's going to save me some time next pod. No, and I want to say, Tim, thank you so much, and Danette and John, great things there. So many different bits and pieces about how much the importance of fun is, and I think we've even seen it in today's conversation. How much you can use fun to help with learning and stuff like that. So today's conversation's been absolutely excellent. Tim, did you have any final thoughts on today's conversation or anything that we didn't get to today that you kind of wanted to touch on?
Well, apart from having to put an explicit language label on the podcast, apologies for that one. I won't share it with my mother, that's for sure. No, I just think about every time that I get on this podcast with you guys, I'm putting another marble in my jar with you guys, and it's beautiful, right? We're collecting all these marbles in this jar, and it's a beautiful thing because the trust, the vulnerability that comes out, the laughs, even with John now, there's marbles in the jar with John, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's purely just from being authentic, transparent, and honest, right? That we're creating this gorgeous trust between us. And it's exactly what we need to create, for our staff and our culture.
And I forgot, Tim, I've realized this is going to be released in January, just for people to know this is being recorded in November, but we're just a couple of weeks ahead here, Tim. So I'm sure actually this might be a little slight detour, but did you want to talk maybe a little bit about people might be trying New Year's resolutions? Did you have any that you might recommend to people or how people might be able to stay? I know this is a bit of an impromptu question, but does anything like that tickle your brain at all?
Oh, anything that sticks. I think that when it comes to New Year's resolutions, just choose one and try and make it accessible and something that fits in with your life. And I think that's, we always do the same, right? Every January we have our big hopes, dreams and goals. And then, we kind of let them all slide. But if you can just find out exactly, what John was saying, it's about taking those little moments and, let's make it those, finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. Maybe that's the New Year's resolution we got to look at in today's society and take that foot off the accelerator a little bit, look around and find that awe in the everyday.
What a great note to leave people on there, Tim. Loved that. Now, Tim, I'm sure people have been listening to this and going, I've got to reach out to Tim. I've got to learn more. Tim, where's the best resources to direct people towards and best places to direct them to contact you?
Yeah, mate, as always, they can find me in nature. But apart from that, Green X7, Tim Jack Adams, they can find me there. So, guys, thank you so much again for filling up the jar of marbles, as always. I always love these conversations. And, John, mate, bloody awesome to have you on, pal. So, hopefully, you enjoy that Ricky Martin tomorrow night, mate. Shake it like nothing else.
I've got to go get a spray tan.
You guys. Do it, mate. Do it. Have an awesome weekend, team. Thank you.
Awesome. And thank you. And yes, thank you all so much. Thank you to everybody that's been listening and subscribing and sharing. We really appreciate it. I hope your year started well. And as always, everybody, have a magical week.